Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Comics Lair for our Fantastic Four retrospective. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott, and we'll start by asking the panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little about how they became fans of the Fantastic Four. Bill, will you start?
Oh, hi, I'm Bill Mulligan. I'm a high school science teacher, indie filmmaker, podcaster, and soon-to-be published author, which is awesome. Fantastic Four. So I discovered comics pretty late in my life, actually. I was in late high school when I began reading comics for real and fell in love with the X-Men, and then just took off the Marvel Universe, the interconnected quality of it. And all roads lead back to the Fantastic Four. Now, I got into it unfortunately, after the classic Lee and Kirby stuff, but there were a lot of reprints, so I was able to enjoy it. And it's just, you can't imagine the Marvel Universe without it. So big fan, still am a huge fan.
Okay. Wayland?
I write under the name Wayland Smith. A lot of my published stories, both short stories and novels, have been superhero fiction. I've been reading comics since the mid-'80s, and I used to co-own a comic shop, so you could say I've got a bit of a comics background. And the Fantastic Four is a very unique and distinctive group, and I've always kind of liked the things. How do I want to put this? I like what they do with them when they're staying true to their actual core.
I'm going to ask you to amplify that in a little while.
Okay.
J.A., do you prefer J.A. or Joe?
You can call me Joe for our purposes tonight.
Okay. Would you go next?
Yeah. Wow. There has never been a part of my life that comics was not a part of. I was there for the Marvel Superheroes show, if you remember that old show. Mm-hmm. And that was my entree into comics. And I discovered the Fantastic Four via the Hanna-Barbera, a Saturday morning cartoon animated show. So I've always been involved with comics, I think. I am a published comic book artist. I was a contributing artist to Gay Comics, where I did a superhero feature called ConTinual, with Andy Mangels as a writer and editor. And I'm also part of the Star Trek community. I was a writing intern I was the last writing intern for the third season of Voyager. So, yeah. So, yeah, but the Fantastic Four and Star Trek have certain things in common thematically, and it was my love of science really that attracted me to the FF, and my love of science fiction that attracted me to the to Star Trek, and I love Jack Cullen's shirt.
Yeah.
Clay, will you go next?
Yeah, I'm Clay Griffith. I write mainly as Clay and Susan Griffith with my wife, Susan. We do historical fantasy primarily. We also have written comics. And we met because of comics. I'm an old FF guy from way back. I remember the original Jack and Stan run. I picked it up in the mid-'60s. I read comics across the board, but I was mainly a Marvel kid. And even within Marvel, there were two that I subscribed to that came to my home every month, folded in half in the little paper sleeve. One was Spider-Man, and one was Fantastic Four. And they were 1 and 2, and everyone else was sort of down here. But so I've been an FF guy. Now, I'm not as versed on modern FF as I am on classic FF, but they were my guys when I was a kid.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Bobby?
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I'm a writer. I write comics, novels, etc., etc. I got started on the FF probably the first time I saw the FF was either the 70s Hanna-Barbera cartoon or perhaps a rerun of the 60s, because I know sometimes they would play those in the afternoons. The first Fantastic Four comic book I ever bought was issue 206. It was actually the fourth comic I ever owned, which I guess is fitting. I was just the cover just enraptured me because the FF were all laying there dead with a big scroll standing over them and like smoke coming from, I was like, well, I've got to find out what happened here. And then, growing up then, I didn't see Fantastic Four books very often in the store, because this was in the pre-comic shop days. So it wasn't until years later that I really got into reading the FF regularly, and I believe it was during the Byrne run when I was in high school. And I just became hooked, fell in love with the characters, went back. I've read them all at this point, went back and read, started at the beginning and read through, and they're just wonderful characters that speak to me. And, and anybody that follows me on social media knows that, Herbie has become like my writing muse that keeps me busy. So, so the FF are very, very special to me. So thrilled to talk about them.
Okay. Jack, and if you would also tell us where you got your shirt, people might be interested in that.
Yeah, sure. I'm Jack Cullen. I write the Recollections of a Rune Knight, and I have another series coming up later this year called Locke Ferguson versus the Aliens. I got my shirt on Amazon, but I like Fantastic Four since way back, early mid 70s, I would say. I got a couple of small books from an uncle. One was Spider-Man, one was Fantastic Four. I forget what the rest were. And it had reprints of the original first couple. I think it was 1 through 6, 1 through 8, something like that. And it was crazy because they argued with each other. None of my other comic books, it was always they were lock and step, and everyone had the same goal, and they were bickering while they were fighting, and it was new, it was exciting. I loved it. And I just, as it was mentioned, pre-comic store days, I'd go down to the local convenience store. Sometimes they would have a Fantastic Four, sometimes they wouldn't, but I'd grab them whenever I could. Yeah, just I think it changed the whole genre.
Well,
and I want to share real quick too. I have this one. I have.
Hey,
There you go. So
and where did that come from?
God, I want to say I got it. I got it online somewhere. I don't remember where. I've had it a while.
Okay. Well, I will say, ConTinual has no affiliation with Bobby's Mystery Online Shop or with Amazon, but I thought people might like to know where they could get those shirts.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's easy to find. Yeah.
Well, there is that magic search engine that reaches into all corners of the galaxy.
Well, the thing always makes for a good shirt. I mean, the thing is such a beautifully designed character.
Oh, yeah.
And so unique, especially for the time, for a superhero of how, and just the way he's drawn is just wonderful.
Well, and since we're talking about the Thing, why do you think he's such a great character? And if you'll start, I'll go around from you.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have said your name. Yeah.
Sorry, that's okay. There's something about the way that Ben talks and acts. There's at times he acts like a big kid. There's a lot of time he tends to play dumb. It's an easy trap to fall into thinking of Ben as being just this dumb bruiser guy. But, this was a guy who was an astronaut. He was a test pilot. This guy's got some brains, but people tended to underestimate him. And really, the fact that he becomes not only a hero, he becomes what he likes to refer to as the blue eye idol of millions. He becomes a lovable hero, and it would not have taken much for someone to go through what he went through to become the villain. There's a lot of stories where what happened to him is a villain's origin. And the fact that he turned that into a strength and became a hero to the point where there have been opportunities for him to get rid of this power, and he's not done it because it took a while, but he came to terms with it. This is me. And so there's a lot that, I think it's just the Ben's heart and courage, I think, is really the thing that, no pun intended, it keeps me coming back to that character, and it's why he's so good and why he is so easily team upable with anybody. you know.
Okay. Jack, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, yeah. No, Bobby made a great point about he could have gone the villain's route. As a matter of fact, in some ways, he mirrors Doctor Doom. And the first couple comic books, before he turned into the Rocky form, he was kind of more of a misshapen lump. And he wore a metal mask, much like Doom. But where Doom let it, obsess him, Ben Grimm didn't. And I just, I mean, it's the worst kept secret in Marvel Comics that a good chunk of them was based on Jack Kirby, who was a New York kid through and through. And so was Ben Grimm. He left the neighborhood, he went in the military, he became a test pilot, everything Bobby just said, but he never
chomped on those big cigars like Jack.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Talking about his Aunt Petunia, talking about the Yancey Street Gang. He never forgot his roots. And that kind of, helped shape the character. The other thing is, he's not he's the strong one of the team, but he's not the strongest in Marvel Comics, but he's constantly fought significantly stronger opponents like the Hulk. And he did it through, wrestling, fighting techniques, using that, not just the brute strength. And it makes a very, very well-rounded character. I always found him to be the heart of the Fantastic Four.
Clay?
Yeah, he is the heart. That's exactly what he is. The thing I like about Ben is the way he plays off of each of the other characters. He has the rivalry, the brother rivalry with Johnny, and they're always, throwing furniture. But I really actually like his relationship with Reed. They're old in the original version anyway. They're old college friends. They went through the war together, World War II in those days. And they had this sort of understanding, and Ben needles Reed, who talks constantly, but there's a friendship. There's something that Kirby understood better than any other comic creator on how to link characters to. I still haven't quite put my finger on it, but there's something visually that Kirby does where the characters are always relating to one another. They're always looking at each other. They're always touching each other. They're protecting one another constantly. And it's brilliant. And without even the dialogue that Stan ladled on, you get the family dynamic. And the purest moment of that is when Franklin is born. Ben and everyone, they come into the hospital, of course, because in those days, pregnant women couldn't do anything but lay in bed. So Sue had been under the book for about a year, except for shots of her in a hospital bed. And they named Franklin's middle name was Benjamin, which no one knew until they tell Ben this. And he, runs in, oh, let me see the little fella. And he grabs him and he hugs him and he's crying because nobody ever named anything after him before. And it's a beautiful moment that wouldn't have meant anything if Kirby hadn't spent 7 or 8 years at that point creating the dynamic. So it's fantastic stuff. No pun intended.
Joe?
Well, the Thing, there is a nobility about the Thing. A nobility that is in contrast to his appearance. There's this internal friction and tension in the character where he's not what he looks like, I have this personal saying, handsome is as handsome does. Now, the Thing is not a conventionally handsome character, and yet the things he does are so wonderfully beautiful. His friendship with Reed, his protectiveness of Sue and the Torch, even when he and the Torch are fighting, there's that protectiveness there. And there's just this wonderful, basic, decent, very human nobility about it. Yeah.
Okay. Wayland?
Ben is definitely a good guy, but I would almost emphasize the guy more than good. He's a very relatable character on a lot of fronts. I've known people like that. I bet a lot of people have known guys like that. The big tough guy with the absolutely huge heart. I just think he's a he's probably the most relatable, at least for me, of the Fantastic Four.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, something Bobby said, that you can pretty much team up Ben Grimm with anybody. In fact, we even had was Marvel 2-in-1, I think.
Marvel
it was.
2-in-1,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the whole premise. Every week, every month, another character would come along, and yeah, how many other characters can you do that with? That he would just make a new dynamic with these people. He's so good, and yeah, his heart is incredible. I can't remember if it was a contest of the champions or something, but there was one where there's some super bad villain, and he's fighting everyone, just fighting them. And with Ben is not. He's one of the stronger ones in the Marvel universe, at least at the time, but he's not on the level of Thor or the Hulk or some of these others. But he's the one that gives him just about the worst time because he won't stay down.
That was a Marvel 2-in-1 annual when he was fighting the champion.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And I loved it because he just, he's literally being beaten to death, and he won't stay down. He's getting back up, and it's just, it was hard to watch, but absolutely. Ben would give his life. All these heroes would give their life for the others, but you get the feeling with Ben is that he would, in those last moments, he'd be totally okay with that. That this is the best way to go, and honored to die, and it wouldn't bother him in the least. As long as he succeeded. So yeah, he's a great character.
Yeah, it's almost like you could kill him, but you would never beat him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the point where I didn't even think of him. After a while, you stop thinking of him as any kind of monster. That's just the way he looks, and there is sort of a cool attractiveness to him. I do agree that when they had that one, I think Byrne did it, where he reverted back to his original form. It was kind of horrifying because I know he's supposed to be a monster, but the blocky thing is, I don't know, kind of cute.
I've heard in doing conventions over the years, I've met several artists who worked on the FF, and they refer to that version as like the Fozzie Bear version of Ben, because he still looks really cute, and yeah.
Well, as long as we're on the topic of Ben, what do you think that Ben and Alicia give to each other? Joe, will you start?
Well, I think, it's a Beauty and the Beast. It's a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. I mean, there's an issue. There's an issue in which they talk about this explicitly. Alicia is in the hospital after the adventure of the Beehive and him, and Sue whispers to Reed, it's just like Beauty and the Beast, where she brings something out in him that no one else can. It's like she is the character that humanizes the character who is human only on the inside. And there's just something very touching about that. In current FF stories, of course, the Thing and Alicia are married and have adopted a Kree boy and a Skrull girl.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I know, really. and I think Alicia is the character who brings Ben Grimm back fully to himself. Yeah.
Well, she's also, like in these current ones, she's the more disciplinarian parent. Like these kids have got it all over Ben. Ben is putty in their hands,
as expected,
and it's Alicia that they can't pull anything over on. I think that's a brilliant way that they set that up.
Jack?
I could totally see that. That goes to the Ben Grimm character. I always thought they were one of the more iconic characters in the couples in the Marvel universe. There's some you just don't want to see broken up. And there was that period where they had him, traveling that alien landscape after the rest of the Fantastic Four went back. And I liked the series about him traveling, this patchwork planet, having these adventures and be able to turn back and forth. But I was losing my mind over the Alicia Human Torch slow burn
Yeah.
relationship to the point where I almost stopped reading the comic. It was like, no, you can't do that. No. It just, and fortunately they eventually self-corrected. But yeah, I just think they're a great couple. They shouldn't be broken up. And we were talking about the kids. They also did with the Universe X. I don't know what the whole compendium is called, but where they had it, where they had two kids that looked like him. It was kind of the same deal. You know, he was the fun parent that, it was just more like she had three kids instead of two. And you can see him doing that. That's him. I would like to point one thing out that we didn't mention at the beginning when we were talking about his character. He was the only one when they originally went up in the original comic in that ship who said, "Hey, this is a bad idea. We don't have enough shielding." Right?
Yeah.
So you got, and everyone else was like, "No, just listen to Reed. He's smart." And
Yeah.
he's always pulled Reed back down to earth, and that's one of the great things about the character.
Yeah, the thing is a reminder to Reed of his own fallibility.
Yes.
Clay?
Well, I think originally Alicia was there, obviously, to point out the humanity inside this monstrous, because she's blind, or I assume she's still blind. I don't read the book now. Okay. And Ben would always be moping around, nuts, if she could see me, she wouldn't have anything to do with me. But then she would touch him and sculpt him. And to her, it was just as beautiful as there were times when she would touch like the Silver Surfer and sculpt him, who's, clearly a little more photogenic than Ben. So it proved to him ultimately that his outward appearance wasn't the most important thing, that it was the inner guy, that Alicia could see it, and that's all that mattered to him, that suited him, and it made him comfortable to stop continually thinking about reverting to Ben Grimm.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, when I first started going back and reading the reprints and everything, I kind of rolled my eyes at the whole Alicia thing, because it's such a trope. The blind woman and the monster. It goes all the way back to Frankenstein's monster and the blind hermit and all. But that being said, there's a reason why some tropes are good, and she's such a good character. You believe that she's genuine. You believe that she's the one character who, like the Silver Surfer, would be like, well, maybe humanity's worth keeping around. A lot of characters in the Marvel universe, if he talked to them, he would have been, "Come on, Galactus, let's get moving on this." This planet needs eaten. And oh yeah, let me tell you, when I saw, I think it was Byrne, when I saw that thing with her in bed with Johnny, I was ready to go punch him right in the snout, which would be difficult because he'd kill me and he doesn't exist. But I really wanted to, because that's a dog move right there. And what did they finally do? She ended up being a Skrull or something.
Yeah.
Lame. I'll take it. I don't care. They could have come up with any excuse. It's like, yeah, all right, fine. Still doesn't excuse Johnny at all. But
Right.
Okay.
It was Legia the Laser Fist, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, Elijah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, sure. I'm fine with that.
So, Wayland, what's your take on this?
I think fine artists, like artists and sculptors, always have a really high degree of insight that a lot of other people don't. And I don't know if it was a conscious decision on the writer's part or not, but Alicia, being such an amazingly talented sculptor, getting interested in Ben, I just think speaks volumes about who Ben is. And echoing what I think Clay said, she sees who he really is and brings him back to being like a regular person. And they complement each other really, really well over the decades. I think it's been one of the better ongoing comic book relationships. Again, aside from the whole Skrull thing.
Okay. Well, I want to pick up on something that Wayland said in the initial round, which is that he thinks the Fantastic Four is superb. I'm paraphrasing here, as long as they stay true to their essential core. So what do you see as their essential core, and when have they let you down on that point?
Sorry, since I said it.
Yes, I'm starting with you since you're the one who told us.
The Avengers are Earth's protectors. The X-Men are outcasts. The Defenders, in their classic version, are when you send out a bunch of invitations to a party and just see who shows up. The Fantastic Four have always been about two things: family and scientific exploration. Like somebody said earlier, and I lost track of who it was, the Fantastic Four are what the ideal of Starfleet is in Star Trek. They don't set out to be heroes. They don't set out to go fight people. They're trying to find things out, to explore things, to discover things. And that's not a theme you see a lot in comics. And when they play up on that, I think those tend to be the best stories, because that's what they were sort of created for. Even when you think about their origin, that's essentially what happened. And the one thing I've always wanted to see that I don't believe has ever happened is I really want a Fantastic Four Doom Patrol crossover. I think that'd be a great story. I'd love to see Reed and the Chief techno-babble at each other.
But would that be classic Doom Patrol or current Doom Patrol or HBO Max Doom Patrol?
Classic Doom Patrol.
Bill, what about you?
What he just said, family immediately comes to mind. They are a family, and that made the bickering believable and not annoying. You never got the feeling that Justice League was a family. They were just the collection of superheroes. God, what a scary family that would be. And it also created the problem whenever you have a Justice League story, you always have the problem. We have to come up with a reason why anyone besides Superman needs to be involved in this, because a lot of kryptonite showed up, an awful lot. I like what Wayland said, that they were explorers. That's how they got their powers, and that didn't turn them. They didn't immediately say we're going to be superheroes. It's like, now we can explore, and it's less likely we're going to get killed because we got these superpowers. But they're still going to go off and do the exploring thing. And I think one of the things that bothered me, because I like that idea, whenever for whatever reason someone left the group, they had to get another. Like, why? You're not really a superhero team. You're a family. If a family member gets estranged from the others, we don't go out and search for someone to take over Cousin Kevin's place.
Well, it was branding. They all had four and all that.
I was going to say, it's that dang four stuck right in the middle of their chest. It's like, we got to go get someone. She-Hulk, come on over. Like,
they couldn't afford to redesign their letterhead.
See, this is actually brought up in a story. Fantastic Four Incorporated has a charter that says the corporation must have 4 superpowered members.
Oh,
this is actually in a story. This is like FF number 160.
Oh, they should have had a story where, like, Johnny Storm just announces he's going to retire for, or take a year off, and you got all these people. Stiltman is just sitting next to the phone waiting for it to ring.
Yeah, but maybe somebody can do something with Stiltman. I just watched a movie that made me think Arm Fall Off Boy was not as absurd a concept as I had thought.
If someone lost their dang mind and offered me a ton of money to write, or just for free, to write a script for Marvel, there is nothing that would stop me from, like, okay, Paste Pot Pete, your time has come. We're gonna make the world love you.
And Jack?
Yeah, I like it when, Wayland described it best, when they're themselves. I think, the exploring part, they should definitely do more of, I've always thought. But it always seems to be, Reed's got a new invention, something goes wrong, let's deal with it. Or we're retaliating with attack because Doom's still mad about a college prank. But the exploring part, that's not really done enough in Marvel, period. It's all about fighting the bad guy of the week, and DC's just as guilty. That was a very, very cool concept with the Fantastic Four. And yeah, the family aspect, it works. And I was worried, Thing's my favorite character out of all, that hands down. But when he left and they plugged in She-Hulk, which I think was Bill, you the one who mentioned it?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is going to be horrible. She pulled it. She fit in well, and that was a long run. They kudos to the writers, because I did not think that was going to go well, and they pulled it off. So you can, put some characters in there, and as long as you have that core group, it can still be the Fantastic Four. as long as they follow the tenets of it and not decide they're going to be the let's bash the bad guy of the week group.
Clay, have I asked you about this?
No.
Okay, well,
And everyone's basically said the right things. They're family and they explore, and that's cool. I mean, it's sort of, the FF was sort of Kirby's Marvel version of Challengers of the Unknown, which he had done at DC prior, but with superpowers. I think replacing members of the family is mentioned with She-Hulk, although I wasn't a fan of the She-Hulk years myself, but that's, that's what makes ball games. People like different things. When they replaced a member with someone from what I considered like the extended family, like an Inhuman, Crystal, or Medusa, because I consider the Inhumans part of the FF extended family. That was okay. I could see them kind of stepping in, but sometimes they'd take long shots. I think like Luke Cage was a member for a while, and it was okay. But it was okay. It wasn't great, but it was all right. They
got one good meme out of Luke being.
It's true. It's true. But yeah, basically they're a family of explorers. It's a kind of a Johnny Quest vibe when it's at its best. As someone earlier was saying, the Avengers are basically cops or a military unit, and I think of the X-Men like a street gang. They gather together for protection because they have similar interests and similar needs to protect themselves. But yeah, the FF are brothers and sisters and husbands and wives and wacky uncles. And I prefer the close to extended family, but when things been going on for 60 years, by God, you got to write something different every now and then, I guess.
Joe, did you want to add anything to what you said earlier?
Speaking of crossovers, the crossover, which unfortunately isn't possible because of corporate business, that I'd like to see is the Fantastic Four and Star Trek, especially Star Trek: The Next Generation. That world that Gene Roddenberry created is what Reed Richards, my favorite character, by the way, is what Reed Richards would like the world to become. Star Trek: The Next Generation is what Reed would like to make the world, that kind of place. And of course, the family thing is what it's about. But I think what most drew me in was the science thing. The fact that Joseph Campbell once talked about this tradition in myth of the hero who goes out into the unknown and takes on its mysteries and its dangers, and comes back with the ability to bestow boons on the rest of mankind. That's essentially what science is, and that's exactly who the Fantastic Four are.
Well, yeah, I would say that the thing that the writers who get it right do, Kirby mainly, Byrne, they let the characters themselves have a sense of wonder about what they're seeing.
Yeah.
The reader's not going to be impressed by the negative zone if Ben or Johnny or somebody's not sitting there going, holy smokes, Reed, what's that? And the good writers get that. The characters have to be wowed, or why would the reader be wowed?
Yeah.
Bobby, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too. I mean, you can really, the family aspect has been mentioned here a lot, and you can always tell because different characters start their stories certain ways. You can start a Spider-Man story by Spider-Man patrolling the city, finding a problem. Very rare, you don't see the FF out there going, well, I got to go patrol the city and make, that's not what they do. That's not who they are. Usually a lot of their stories, I think it's telling. I think this was mentioned earlier too, that so many of their stories start out with them all sitting around the kitchen table, or they're sitting in the living room and Ben's got his feet propped up on the table reading a magazine. So there's that family thing that's always at the core of their story. They generally are reacting to something, or they are going off to explore something. There's a great, I mean, the Lee Kirby run, there's a big period of that where every issue they're discovering something new that is still used in the Marvel universe now. We discover the Inhumans, we discover Wakanda. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. It's one right after the other, and those are the stories because it takes us, like you were saying, you're seeing it through their eyes of, holy crap, look at this interesting stuff we've discovered. Then, of course, something usually goes wrong, and because it is still a superhero-y or action-y kind of a story. But like, there's a great run in the 250s. I don't remember issue numbers, but it's like 6 issues where they go and they are exploring the native zone.
Yep.
And it really does feel like 6 Star Trek episodes because they're in a ship flying around. They land on a planet. Stuff happens. The end of it, they leave, and they're very science fiction-y stories. And those are the kind of things I think where the FF really shine in those type of science fiction stories. I think that's why, the Galactus story is had they have written that for the Avengers, it could have still been a good story, but it wouldn't have been the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, like Clay was saying, the writers that really get it know how to tell those stories to where there's a lot of intellect and thought behind it. It's like, going back to Joe's point about Star Trek. Star Trek doesn't tend to fire phasers first. It's, can we talk our way out of this? Or can we find a way to solve this peacefully? If not, then we go shoot something. And the FF's kind of the same way. It's like, here comes Galactus. Let's try to talk him out of this, of eating the planet and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, despite the corporate restrictions, there was a Star Trek Legion of Superheroes team up several years ago.
There was a Star Trek X-Men, too.
Yeah, so if they can do that, there's no reason they can't team up with the Fantastic Four at some point. Somebody just has to want it badly enough.
It would be very appropriate. I mean, it would be very appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the FF are the characters who should meet Gene Roddenberry's creation.
And they have a time machine.
And yes, they do. They do.
I think my favorite unofficial crossover they did, I believe it was a John Byrne story. It was when Superman ran into a particular group of characters from the Legion of Superheroes. And
yes.
Brainiac 5, Sunboy, Invisible Kid, and Block. And that was the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, even did that cover that was the same as he had done an FF cover where they fought Gladiator, and Gladiator, I mean, he drew him. He was Superman with a mohawk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And of course, people have always pointed out that The Incredibles is kind of like the greatest Fantastic Four cartoon that doesn't actually star the Fantastic Four. And there's some crossover with the powers, but I think what really makes The Incredibles seem like a Fantastic Four is that they are a family.
Yeah.
And the conflict and the love and everything there is within this family. That it kind of hurts me that they haven't yet. I know they keep trying, but they haven't yet done it right.
Yeah, the people doing the movies, I don't know what comics they read for inspiration.
They didn't, clearly.
Well, that's probably true too. Yeah.
Actually, I was seeing something on YouTube about this last night. Marvel Studios deliberately hires writing and production talent that either doesn't know or doesn't like the comic books. They actually do this. They get these people, and then they send them to what's called Marvel Boot Camp, where they basically teach them the basics and the ropes of the Marvel Universe, then they just turn them loose and let them do whatever they want to do.
Well, since we've been talking about characters and character relationships, who's your favorite member of the FF and why? Clay, you want to start?
Well, the easy answer is Ben because he's so enjoyable, but I think I'd have to say Reed. I've always kind of liked the character who's forced to be the adult in the room. like sort of the classic X-Men. I was a Cyclops guy. There's just something about that guy. Now, I don't know that Reed ever really wanted to bust out and be wild. I tend to doubt it. But he has to hold it together. He's a good mainstream 1950s sitcom dad, certainly in the old days, smoking his pipe and talking to the kids. And his powers are okay. Stretching, it looks a little weird. That's why I think sometimes movie might be tricky, because in a cartoon you can do it. With a real person, you might get a laugh, and that's going to be tricky with the FF. It might be unfilmable in some ways. But anyway, so bottom line is I'm a Reed guy, but I'm a pre-bearded Reed guy. In fact, I was sort of stunned because I'd been out of the FF for a long time, and I saw a picture of Reed with a beard, and I thought, the only time my Reed ever had any facial hair was when there was some sort of terrible catastrophe about to happen, and he didn't come out of his laboratory for a week, and he's hunched over his microscope. And I'm thinking, you've got Reed with a beard. How do we know when the Earth is in danger? Because we don't know when he's unshaven now. Mm-hmm. But he's cool. I love him.
He looked like he was posing for a box of cough drops, I swear. Oh my God.
So Bobby, who's your favorite?
Well, if you're, obviously I think everybody would think, from the physical standpoint, probably Ben, but from beginning to now, looking at the character who has probably changed the most, who I've come to like more as she's grown, is Sue. I think Sue has become this incredibly strong character, because certainly in the early days, she was just the girl, She was
the victim, basically.
She got kidnapped a lot
in the beginning.
Yeah, got kidnapped a lot, got tied up a lot, dismissed quite often by Reed. But over the years, the creators have given Sue new things, and she has learned things to do with her power that ideally, in the power structure of the Marvel Universe, she's probably one of the most powerful people in the world.
Yeah.
Because she can do things that you don't see, with these invisible. I mean, she can kill. If she wanted to be an assassin, a little invisible force field in somebody's carotid artery, you're dead. So Sue is very powerful, but she's also, in years of being part of this dynamic, her education has grown. I believe now, like she has doctorates and a scientist in her own right. And
I don't know where that came from, because there's not a story for it.
Yeah. But they've done different things with that. She runs the business, the Fantastic Four Incorporated. I mean, Reed's the boss, but Reed is the very essence of an absent-minded professor. He's dealing with these problems. Paying the light bill is not on Reed's mind. So Sue is running the business, because Ben and Johnny don't do it. So Sue kind of takes that on. And there's just a lot of cool stuff that I think has happened with her. And, different writers write her better than others, but I've been really impressed with, seeing her growth and change, because the other three characters have not changed as dynamically. There's a lot about them that's still the same as it was in those early issues.
In fact, they keep regressing the Torch. For some
reason,
yeah.
He kind of gets young. He gets younger and dumber, it seems like.
Yeah. For some reason, the only way people know how to write the Torch is to regress him back to a teenager. They won't let him grow. And I mean, he's been married and divorced by now, and Johnny never grows up and stays grown up.
Well, and it's another thing too. I think they sometimes do with Ben is they play Johnny as dumb a lot. Now Johnny is not Reed and Ben. I mean, their intellect, but Johnny is also, he's no idiot. He's been around this stuff. I mean, he is a really good mechanic, so he obviously has to have some knowledge of mechanics. But so many writers tend to forget that part and just focus on he's a dumb kid.
Chicks and hot rods, man.
Chicks and yeah.
Yeah. And, just to be the torch, Johnny has had to learn everything about the properties and dynamics of fire. He's had to become the world's greatest authority on fire.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Jax, who's your favorite?
Oh, hands down, Ben Griffith. I should say the Baxter Building, since we've talked so much about Ben. But no, I can't. Out of the four of them, the one I like the least is the Human Torch. It's basically because, as I was saying, the way they write them. But that being said, I know people in real life who got divorced and immediately turned into 12-year-olds. It's like you show up at the house, their apartment after they've been divorced, and it's like you're sitting there playing a video game like you did when we were 14. So there are people like that. How long has this bowl of cereal been sitting here? I do like the dynamic where him and Ben play, practical jokes with each other and things along those lines. But he was always my least favorite character. Ben has always been my favorite. We discussed everything about Ben. He's just a likable character. He's the heart of the Fantastic Four. It just, I don't know. He's the best. I do gotta agree with Bobby with the Invisible Woman, though. They have gotten so much better with that character. I mean, they did a huge disservice when they originally wrote her. She was very two-dimensional. And, there was this one, I forget which comic book I'm reading, where she basically just told somebody flat out, shut them down, saying, she'll put a force field around their lungs. It was like, oh, okay, yep, nope, I'm done. But Ben, oh God, he's just my favorite character.
Yeah, I want to say, I mean, Sue, she knocked out the Hulk once doing that.
Did she? Yeah.
Yeah, put a bubble around his head.
Yeah.
No oxygen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they gave her the force field a long time ago, and they really didn't do a lot with it. And then I would have to say, the 80s, they really started developing the character, and they did a great job. She's probably my second favorite character after Ben. Reed, intellect, he's always in the lab, he's absent-minded. You got to love that character. But I've always found to be more well-rounded. If Ben's the heart of the Fantastic Four, she's probably the soul.
Yeah.
Because she keeps them together. She keeps the lights on. So, but yeah, the Baxter Building is my favorite.
Bill?
It's been blown up, put back together, and it's still with us.
It's great. Herbie, I know he doesn't get a lot of credit. No,
hey, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, of the Fantastic Four, Ben by far. I do like poor Sue. They did Sue so badly in some of those early issues, and I love them. But there was one. I know there was one where they claimed they were getting letters about how Sue was like the weak link. And
FF number 11.
Thank you. So 11 issues in, Ben goes off and is literally yelling at you, the reader, through the comic book panels. And you're like, okay, calm down, big guy.
If you want to see women fighting all the time, go see the lady wrestlers.
That's right, yeah. And but that's just an admission that you're not doing well when our imaginary characters are reading imaginary letters about a very real problem we have. But I got to say, and this is cheating, I realize, but my favorite Fantastic Four character is not one of the Fantastic Four. It's Dr. Doom.
Oh, Doom. Yeah.
And what really kills me about the movies is twice now they've tried to do Dr. Doom, and somehow twice they've completely failed to understand even the simplest concept of why Dr. Doom was such a cool character and should be so easy to do. And they're like, well, it's unrealistic. He's a leader of his own country. And he's like, you've got a raccoon on a talking tree. I mean, stop. Yeah. Nothing's unrealistic if you embrace it and go with it. Stop this nonsense.
Yeah.
But he's such a great. I was always happy when Dr. Doom showed up because, and he's got to be a good character because he's taking on 4-on-1, and that's something a lot. Even and I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they don't understand. It's only as good as the villain. If Ronan is not that impressive, and he wasn't, it's not really a fair fight when he takes on the entire Guardians of the Galaxy. They got him outnumbered 5-6 to 1. But with Dr. Doom, you really, or Magneto, you really feel like, hey, our heroes are in trouble. Yeah, they may have numbers on their side, but this guy this guy really wants to win, and he's got the chops to pull it off.
Well, I think too with Doom, Doom's the villain because he's against the Fantastic Four in the Fantastic Four comic book. Had this book been called Doctor Doom, he is the hero of his story.
Yeah, well, he is in his own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and even to the people of the country that he rules with an iron fist, they love him.
Yeah.
You know, he keeps them safe. He keeps them protected.
You know, the people of Latveria have to love Doom, or they'll face the ultimate punishment.
Well, true, but they have done stories where Doom has been ousted.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, the people are like, "Oh, thank God you're back."
There are people who still miss Stalin. So I mean, it's true.
It's often, honestly, it's kind of like an abused child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's done horrible things to them, but he's the protector. It's all they know. And when he goes away, they can't break that cycle, and they welcome him back. That's how I've always viewed the people of his country.
And I'm sure their country is one of those backwater European places that has just a long history of being conquered by one horrible group of people after another who left nothing but death and destruction in their wake. So the American ideas of freedom and liberty and everything, it's like, that's all nice, but you guys live in a country that never gets invaded. You have a history of not getting invaded. And when, Pearl Harbor happens, you just never stop talking about it. Every day was Pearl Harbor for us. Doom is actually a step up, and he's got, cool armor and everything else. Now, he's a despot. He's a bad guy. It'd be nice if he was overthrown and replaced by a better person. But they probably figure that's not likely, and they're probably right.
You also got to figure, right? It's probably a country of potato farmers or something along those lines. And with his scientific genius, he's probably walking around throwing out laptops. Here you go.
Yeah.
Which completely changes their quality of life.
Yeah, they're growing potatoes like this big now. I mean, great.
So, Wayland, who's your favorite character?
Well, since everyone else got to do two, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. Of the core group, absolutely Sue. She is brilliant in a different way than Reed. She is more practical than a lot of the other characters. Her combination of powers can make her incredibly dangerous. She just actually holds herself back a lot. And I like that they're occasionally letting her grow in other areas. She had a limited series 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Revealed that for years she's been going on secret missions for S.H.I.E.L.D. Because really, who's going to be a better espionage agent than Sue Storm?
That's cool.
I love the way they let her do that, and I love the combination of her invisibility and the force field's invisibility. She could be dropping people left, right, and center. She holds herself back a lot, and I'll go with whoever it was that said it. She's very much the soul of the team. If you expand the circle outwards a little bit, I'll also go with Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom and Ra's over at DC Comics, Ra's al Ghul, have one thing in common that the good writers pick up on. It's not so much they want to rule the world, it's they think the world would be better off under their control, and you could make a very good case that it would.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, pro-Doom, I'm not pro-Ra's. When you look at what they're actually doing and what their actual interests are, and what happens in the areas they're in control, a lot of things get a lot better that way.
Okay. Joe, who's your favorite?
Gotta go with Reed. As I was mentioning earlier, it was my love of science that brought me to the Fantastic Four to begin with. My love of science and my love of comics. But I mean, the first thing that I ever wanted to be, before I wanted to be a writer and an artist, was a scientist. And I say that in capital letters, a scientist, because I was interested in all of it. And Reed is the character who is all of it. And there's nothing scientific that Reed either cannot do or cannot call upon the right person to help him do. I mean, Reed is the humane and positive values of science expressed as a person. And people don't always know how to write Reed, which is very frustrating because people think intellect isn't cool, that a character has to be dysfunctional to be interesting. But yeah, so people have a tendency to write Reed as this intellectually, well, no, as this kind of emotionally stunted character who doesn't respect his wife and doesn't respect his family and makes unilateral decisions and isn't really sensitive to anyone else's needs, and it's not really who he is. Reed is the science guy who says, "Let me see what I can do to make things better." And
now, it probably doesn't help that when everybody else was coming up with code names, his was Mr. Fantastic. You're like, dude.
Well, but do you think that writers who write Reed as emotionally stunted, picking up on what Joe was saying, are just taking low-hanging fruit because there's a stereotype about people who are very intellectual not being in touch with their emotional sides, or not?
Yeah. I think some of my favorite Reed Richards moments from the comics are not the big moments, but it's those moments when he's sitting on the edge of Franklin's bed, holding Franklin in one arm and reading him bedtime stories and making the animals out of his fingers.
Yeah.
Yes, Reed is, for all of that. And I think that's where Sue's importance comes in. Sue keeps him grounded to, you have a family, because don't get lost in there in your lab for 3 weeks. Come out, spend time. And I think that keeps Reed kind of human. It keeps Reed from going over that line into the dark side. And so seeing him doing things with Franklin, Franklin's a teenager now in the comics, but when Franklin was younger, seeing him do those things with Franklin, they were always special moments for me.
We know there are not very many parents in any comic universe, especially parents of young children. So picking up on what Bobby was saying, what do you think are the advantages of the Fantastic Four having, I'm not sure whether Valeria is still around or not. I know Franklin is. So what do you see as the advantages of the Fantastic Four being parents from a storytelling or a reader standpoint? Jack, will you start?
Sure. It's unusual because in a lot of the comic books, you'll have superheroes that suddenly find out they have a kid that's 10, 12, 14, and never raised them. This is unique in us. But on the other hand, they keep getting attacked. They're raising their kids in the Baxter building, which has a big 4 on the top of it. So, hey, this is where we live. Come find us. And they're putting their kids in danger. And that's been addressed in some of the books, where Sue has worried about that.
Yeah. Well, there's a story about New York Child Protective Services trying to take Franklin and Valeria away from Reed and Sue for that reason. Yeah.
That's the great part is they address it. And what I was going to say when Bobby was talking, I didn't want to interrupt him, was the good writers address that, Reed's not, he doesn't mean to be absent-minded. It's just kind of how he is. And some of the good stories has been Sue calling him on the carpet on it. They're like, hey, you're part of a family. Spend time in the family. And then, he does in his moments with Franklin. But, it's unimaginable in real life putting children in an environment like that where they'd be killed. But they do it well in the Fantastic Four because it's like, okay, there's dangers out there, but we're still going to have a loving family. We're going to still raise our kids, and we're going to try to do both. And we're going to try to balance it. We're going to try to make it for them as safe as possible. And we're going to put a force field on the Baxter building, and we're going to have nanny boss and various things along those lines to try to protect them. So I think they do a good job with it. And I hate the shows where like they introduce a baby to try to bring life back into it, but with the Fantastic Four with Franklin, years ago, and then his sister, after that, I thought they did a really good job of it.
Bill?
And well, one of the things that made the Fantastic Four different from a lot of old school comic book characters, they didn't have secret identities. Everybody knew who they were. It's conceivable, to coin a phrase, that Batman or Superman could have children, and as long as they kept their identities quiet and everything, they could keep this going. But no, there was no out of it. They were who they were, and it's kind of an inevitable result of marriage and sex that children are going to start showing up. So it was perfectly natural that they would. It does create a lot of problems for them. Besides, the fact that you've got such a vulnerability now that villains could go after you. Although, I don't know, would Doctor Doom go after a baby? I mean, wouldn't he consider that to be completely, utterly dishonorable? But then I'm sure there's some version of Kang, and that's his thing. He goes after the babies of superheroes. So, there's, it did definitely raise the stakes. And then, of course, there's the other thing is, what exactly is this baby going to be? And Franklin turned out to be pretty powerful indeed.
Wayland, what do you think?
When you introduce kids and you do it right, there's a lot of phenomenal stories you can do, and I think they've done some very good ones. The one I would like to see, and this hasn't been done yet, and you really need a phenomenal writer for this, but like people were just saying about, the kids are in danger because they're part of the Fantastic Four and they keep getting attacked. I'd like to see a writer tackle paralleling that to what kids are going through at schools now.
Oh.
My parents are a superhero and I might get attacked. Yeah, well, I go to regular school and I can get shot. I would like to see someone conceptually do that story. I think that'd be a great story. And I am not putting myself out there for that one. I don't think I could pull it off. But I'd love to see someone do that. And just the family moments with the kids have been great. Working kind of like Doctor Who and the Companions, if Reed is explaining stuff to Franklin or Valeria, then the readers can sort of go, oh, that's how that works. There's a lot of great stuff they can do that way.
Joe?
The other interesting dynamic that I've thought about for a long time is, and I don't know how they would do this in the context of the FF because the characterizations don't necessarily allow for this. But I've always imagined Franklin being really ticked off at the FF, and the FF going somewhere, and Franklin either saying, I don't want to go, or them saying, okay, you can't go this time, you have to stay home. And then that's when villains invade the Baxter building, when Franklin is by himself, and it becomes the Fantastic Four version of Home Alone.
Oh God, that's funny.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know exactly how you would set that up with the FF because the kid in Home Alone is basically someone that everyone else picks on because he's the smallest, and the FF doesn't do that with Franklin. So I don't know how you would do that, but it'd be a fun story if someone would if someone could come up with a way to pull that off, and then have Franklin with no powers using Reed's stuff to hold off the bad guys.
Oh, that'd be brutal. Who would be the villains? Paste Pot Pete?
Paste Pot Pete, yeah.
Maybe the Frightful Four, or maybe somebody a little more, maybe somebody a bit more formidable, But someone who would at first be a real threat to Franklin, and then someone that Franklin would finally just use Reed's stuff to knock the stuffing out of.
So it'd be kind of like the X-Men story when Kitty was home alone and the.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that was a good one. Yeah,
that was a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, Clay.
Yeah, kids are tricky. It's like in sitcoms where they want the fun and the humor or the drama of the pregnancy, and the trip to the hospital and the new baby. And then the next season, the kid's basically written out. Maybe they're upstairs all the time. You never see them. And there have been writers in the FF who do that. You don't see Franklin. You don't see the kids. Even right after he was born, they tried to come up with the concept of protecting him or isolating him by introducing Agatha Harkness as his sort of super witch nanny. which the Frightful Four attacked her house, by the way. And
Mhm.
my favorite FF villain, the Wizard, who's totally based on super gloves, gets beaten up by a cat. So, but I can take the kids or leave them, frankly. You can do interesting things with them, but I prefer sort of bachelor FF personally. But I'm old.
Okay. Bobby, do you want to add anything to what you said earlier?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it depends on the writers because, we've had this, there's a trope in comics when you get a new creative team that they, how many times have we heard everything is a lie or we're going to radically change everything. And with these particular characters, but there's a lot of people that don't know how to write married characters. So the first thing they do is give them marital problems and split them up.
Yes.
Or I don't know how to write kids. Like the current FF book, something has happened where Reed has shunted the kids a year into the future. So in the kids' point of view, it's instantaneous. But now we get a year of the adults without the kids because I don't know why, but I guess they didn't want to write the kids in. So they've gotten rid of all the kids for a year. So I think it just depends on, who the writers are, the artists are, and what they want to do. And, but it's one of those things, like if someone handed me the reins of the Fantastic Four tomorrow, I'm not a big fan of that. Well, I'm just going to wipe it out because I don't like it because Franklin's been around for quite a long time. Franklin's older than I am. I wouldn't just get rid of that. You have to find ways to tell the stories with the characters that are there. And, because I think sometimes, creators come in and if you, and go, well, I don't like this, let me change it. Sometimes you have to go like, okay, if you don't like Superman, don't write Superman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
And I've seen that with the Fantastic Four. That I won't mention writers, but I remember this one writer took over for a very short time, and in interviews talked about how much he hated the Fantastic Four. And I'm thinking, why did you accept the job? If you don't like the Fantastic Four, why would you want to write the Fantastic Four? So I think there's a lot of that in getting to enjoying the characters or dealing with what's there. And I think, the FF are unique in that family aspect. I mean, there are other comic characters that have kids or are married, but I think it's like was mentioned earlier, they're not hiding it. But I also think too, in the real world, celebrities have children and they're almost always become targets of fanatics and, diplomats and government officials, certainly presidents or prime ministers or have children, they become instant targets. This is not a thing that's just unique to these people living in the Marvel universe.
I've got to bring something up. So I've got 30 years of law enforcement. My wife is a former police officer. My whole family is police officers. I have a kid. We absolutely do things different because of our profession. There's things my kid can't do that their friends could because we view the world differently. We know there's threats. Why can't we give out addresses? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Things along those lines. There is a difference in the real world, just as there are the comic books. Obviously, it's much more, expanded in the comic book world. But yeah, celebrities, politicians, law enforcement, you do have to take precautions if you're going to have a family. A lot of people that aren't involved in it are like, well, why are you doing this? Why do you do that? Well, because there are people that want to hurt us. And is it at the forefront of the brain? No. But is it the back of the brain? Yeah. Wayland will tell you, right? You look at most law enforcement are firefighters. They're going to a restaurant, right? Police officers get us back to the wall. Firefighters can tell you where all the exits are and where all the fire alarms are and where all the extinguishers are. It's part of the profession, but you look at, when you go in the building, you get your back to the wall, you're looking at the exit, you're looking at the wait staff. Is that somebody I've arrested?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to worry about my kid eating in this restaurant? And yeah, and that's covered with the Fantastic Four with having children, and they do that well, depending on the writer. Sometimes, as Bobby said, they just kind of shunt them, but it's you can go on with your life and still have the children, but you do have to. It factors how you raise your kids, and the kids factor how you do your job.
Yeah, right. Because it's a good bet. Like Franklin and Valeria are not going to public school, or if you take them to the park, Ben is usually with them.
Yeah.
There is that level of protection. They wouldn't just say, "Yeah, Franklin, going off to the park by yourself."
Sure.
There's they've put some thought into it as parents. So but that's stuff. When you're writing these type of super powerful characters, and I know several of us here have written superheroes before, that sometimes it's taking that real world thing and amplifying it to fit that made up world. And so you can dig that stuff back a lot of times to finding the real world like spark of inspiration for that idea.
Well, I hate to say this, but we are now at an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Does anybody need to leave immediately? No? Well, do you want to stay another 10 minutes and talk about the movies?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, I like to give people a chance to leave if they're needing to leave, but okay. So we'll start with what's your favorite movie and your least favorite movie. Bill?
For the Fantastic Four?
Yes.
Favorite would be Rise of the Silver Surfer, because I love the Silver Surfer. He's one of my favorite characters, and Doug Jones did a fantastic job of bringing him to life. Least favorite, I guess the Roger Corman one, but you know what? For what it was, they did a good job. The costumes were as good as it could be. That movie cost nothing, absolutely nothing. So if it had had the craft service table budget that the modern ones had, it could have actually looked pretty good, but there's nothing you can do with so small a budget. It was just made to keep the rights. I don't like either of the Hollywood ones because they screwed up Dr. Doom. And again, it's not rocket science. He's a rocket scientist. He's a genius, and he runs his own country, and that's what makes him unique. He's got the power. He's the leader of a whole country. He's got the entire resources of a country, and a very wealthy one, given the fact that he is, as I mentioned, a genius. And they basically made him, I don't want to get political here, but he's basically Donald Trump in a suit of armor. I am not impressed. He seemed petty and small, and the Fantastic Four beating him up almost seemed kind of pathetic.
Did you see the documentary Doomed?
Yes, that yeah. Of course, I've never actually seen the Corman version in a decent release. It was always one of those gray market things people would hide, and like, we're not supposed to have this, and we'd watch it, and you're just like, oh my God. Was there any post-production in this? The poor guy playing Dr. Doom is speaking under that mask, and it's like Hardware Wars. Like, like, what did he say? What? Could we have not dubbed in this poor masked man? But
that would have cost $10 extra.
I look forward to seeing what Marvel will do, and I also have an overwhelming dread that the time for a good Marvel Fantastic Four movie has passed. That Marvel is definitely past its peak. They seem to have kind of lost their mojo, and they're okay with that because even subpar Marvel movies will make their money back, for now at least. And I don't know how you fit the Fantastic Four into the current Marvel universe. The only thing I've thought of that might work, and it's almost too obvious with the multiverse and everything, is to bring them in as if they were what they really were meant to be, the first superhero team, and that's what they were in their multiverse, and basically do a fish out of water story where these folks come in from their version of the 1960s, and now it's the 2020s, and they were the first, and now they're in a world where it's like, oh, superheroes, yeah, yawn. So to sort of go from there, you might have some fun with that, but I really don't know how you do it. You certainly can't have them getting on a rocket ship and going into outer space and being turned into these superheroes, because everyone's gone in a rocket ship. They know about shielding at this point. There's, it's going to be a tough nut to crack, but I hope they do, because I would really love to see it done well. And I want to see Galactus. I don't want him to be just a big fluffy cloud. I want him to be
really.
a giant guy in a purple suit and the silver. Just do it the way it's supposed to be done. Dang it.
Okay, Wayland, favorite or least favorite movie?
I will just give my simple personal opinion that there has not yet been a good Fantastic Four movie, and just leave it there.
Okay, Joe?
They haven't done my favorite one yet, and I'm very skeptical of the idea that they ever will. But I did not see the movie released in 2015 that had the name Fantastic Four on it.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I honestly forgot all about that.
Yeah,
Probably for the best.
I deliberately did not see that because there could have been property damage in the cinema if I had gone to see that. Really,
There would have been, Joe.
Oh yeah. So I mean, oh Lord.
Joe, I watched that movie, and while I was watching it, at least a part of my brain was thinking, I hope Joe's not watching this.
No, see, I studiously avoided it for that very reason. So no, that leaves the two Tim Story movies, and with those, I have the same problem that Billy has, which is they have this character in here who is not Doctor Doom, but is really Victor von Luthor.
Yeah,
you know. I mean, I don't know what the thought process is in turning the character of Doctor Doom, who is this almost Shakespearean figure, into Victor von Luthor.
A jerk. A
Yeah,
superpowered jerk.
yeah, and I mean, he doesn't have any of the class or the regal bearing of Doom. I mean, he's just this. Well, he's this robber baron in an armor. And what I will say is that I loved Ioan Griffith as Reed, but I wish they had written his leadership abilities better. And Chris Evans was a pitch-perfect Human Torch. So, yeah. But otherwise, I don't know if we will ever see the Fantastic Four done the way the way I think it ought to be done. So, but I mean, they're going to try.
Yeah.
And being Marvel, they're going to get some things right, and they're going to screw some things up. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Clay.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of any of them, frankly. But and my main problem with what the Silver Surfer and the first one, sort of similar to Bill's problem with Doom. My problem was with Reed. I think it's in the Silver Surfer one where there's some scene. I can't remember what's going on by this point because I've kind of tuned out. But Reed basically claps back at some military guy or something that they've been calling him a nerd or something, and he says something about I'm married to the cutest girl in high school or the hottest girl in school or whatever, and you're just a. And I thought that's the least Reed thing possible. I mean, not only is it a bad Reed line, it's the least possible Reed thing to say, and that was just that kind of where those movies hit for me.
Bobby?
Yeah, I tolerated the first two. Oh man, the last one was really awful. I have seen the Corman one. I give the Corman one credit for at least they tried to keep the characters right. For what they had. There are some pretty moments in the first two Tim Story ones. I think, like you said, Bill, Doug Jones is incredible as the Silver Surfer. I wish he had been in a better movie. I thought, Chris Evans was perfect as the Human Torch. I liked, I just blanked on his name. The Thing.
Michael Chiklis.
Thank you, Michael Chiklis. Yeah. I thought Michael Chiklis. Not only was Michael Chiklis good as the Thing, which is very hard to pull off in all the makeup and whatever, but I thought he made a good Ben Grimm too. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I thought they had some good, that moment in that movie where he's cured and he decides to do this to himself. I think Chiklis plays that incredibly well. You feel for this guy. And I think that they captured those. I'm curious to see what they do with the live action MCU. I hope for the best. But I tell you, and I'm surprised nobody's ever done it. But what I would love to see just a wonderful animated Fantastic Four movie. Or instead of a live action movie, I would almost rather have a Disney Plus 10-episode Fantastic Four series. Let's go at season 1. Let's go explore the neutral zone. There you go, 10 episodes. Season 2, let's go do whatever. I think, could you imagine spreading out the last Galactus story and making it a bigger story than just a hour and a half, action movie? Let's get it, deal with the Surfer, deal with this, I think the FF is more, would work better in that setting, like a comic, month to month to month, episode to episode, than it would be to just go, okay, we got an hour and a half to show off all their powers, and because it could be a big cast, and so I would love to see that, but I doubt that. I know that's not going to happen. I know we're going to get a movie, but yeah.
Jack.
All right. I know I'm the one that suggested this panel. I agree that there isn't a great Fantastic Four movie. I will say I think you will never find a better Ben Grimm /Thing than Michael Chiklis. I thought he knocked it out of the park, and that's not just because he's a local boy from where I am. I thought, all right, he improved his hairline in the original Ben Grimm, but I thought he absolutely knocked it out of the park. He made me come back to see the second movie. So I might owe him for that. But I think I'm a little more optimistic than Bill. I'm hoping that they're going to get it right this time. This time they fleshed out the Marvel Universe so well. It's not going to be the exact comic. They can't be. They're going to change some things. The purists are going to be mad, but I live in hope that they're going to be able to pull it off finally. So, fingers crossed.
Okay. Well, on that note, is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about that we haven't touched on?
I would like to ask just of everybody, if you had to recommend something, an FF story for someone to read, what would you recommend? I'll start if you want.
Yeah, you start, Bobby.
I'll throw out just 2, because there's a lot of runs you can enjoy. I mentioned earlier the exploring the neutral zone storyline from the 80s. That's where they first get the black costumes, which I love the black costumes. That's an excellent one. There's also my favorite Fantastic Four story. Oddly enough, it's not an issue of the Fantastic Four. It's a one-shot in Marvel Fanfare number 15, where Ben Grimm wakes up one morning and he realizes he's mutating. He has whiskers. And without spoiling anything, there's a series of events that just goes on after this that just makes it a story that I go and reread.
Oh, yeah, that's Barry Windsor Smith did the
Barry Windsor Smith writing and drawing it. Absolutely. Beautiful. One of my all-time favorite Ben Grimm stories of all time. Just absolutely excellent. And you can find them dirt cheap. They're not hard to find online. Totally worth it if you're an FF fan.
Okay, Clay.
Well, I don't know. I would recommend probably, I mean, the early Kirby Lee stuff, but, because of the sexism of the period, which would be difficult if I'm recommending something to someone who's never read the FF, like, tell me what's great about the FF. I don't know if that would suit now. I don't know if you could get someone who's younger than 40 or so to accept those stories. But if you could, there's a Doctor Doom story, 3 or 4 issues, sort of Kirby's version of The Prisoner.
Oh yeah,
70 something.
No, 84 to 87.
Okay, it's beautiful. It's prime Kirby art. It's as good as he ever got. Joe Sennett was inking, and it's a lovely little low key Doctor Doom story in Latveria. So probably that.
Okay, Joe.
If I were going to direct someone to a story that shows why I really love the FF, there are 2 places I'd send them. One, the original Galactus trilogy, FF number 48 to 50, where we first meet the Surfer and we first meet Galactus. And then issues 57 to 60, the epic about Doom stealing the Silver Surfer's powers and defeating the FF.
Yeah.
That stuff to me is as good as it gets.
Okay.
For more recent stuff.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
For more recent stuff, though, I would send them to the John Byrne story arc, in which Doom uses Tyros the Terrible, who used to be Terrax the Tamer, to attack the FF, while Reed is abducted and put on trial by an interplanetary court for crimes against the universe for saving Galactus' life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love how we're referring to a 40-year-old story as the more recent stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? How
Yeah.
about that? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wayland, what would you recommend?
There was a fairly recent, and I mean actually recent, issue where, if I'm remembering correctly, Doom was getting married.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually brought the Fantastic Four. He invited them to the wedding.
Yep.
Reed as his best man, but it went about it in a very Doctor Doom kind of way. And it showed a lot of the depth of character of Doom, but there were all these nice little moments showing who the individual members of the FF were. And of course, Johnny screwed everything up because it's Johnny.
Yes.
He does.
Johnny.
And that's not necessarily regressing to a teenager. I've known people like that. They just make really poor decisions on a regular basis, and that's just sort of who they are. But that was within the last year, I think. And as far as who the FF is, I think that's a pretty good modern story of this is who each of them are, and this is how they relate to the wider world.
Yeah.
Bill?
Can you imagine like shopping for the wedding gift? You're like, does Doom need a fondue set? I don't know. Maybe he already has one. This is not one of the great stories, whatever, but it's one that just holds a special place in my heart. And I think it might have been it was a special issue. Maybe it was the 200th issue. The cover is Mr. Fantastic and Dr. Doom fighting in a hall of mirrors. Yep. It was 200.
That's FF number 200, yes.
Okay. I love the blow-off match. If you're a wrestling fan or something, there's that final thing. This is it. It's in a steel cage. We're going to settle things once and for all. Mm-hmm. These two, no one else is here. It's just going to be you and me, mano a mano, and let's settle accounts. And I was dumb enough to actually believe that, wow, this is going to settle things. Yeah, whatever. And I think if I recall correctly, spoiler alert, I think it ends with Doom's mask falls off and he sees his horrible face reflected a million times. And they've never really been clear on that because depending on who's writing it, he either has a face so horrible that I love this. The nurse walks into the room and sees him there. She's like, oh my God, that face, so horrible, and drops everything. I'm like, wow, great bedside manner. You are terrific at your job. Or they go the alternate thing where he has like a tiny little scratch that, but because he's so vain that to him that might as well be mutated. Yeah. So
well, in the John Byrne issues, John actually managed to reconcile those two.
Yes, he did in a pretty clever way.
Well, John Byrne's very good at that stuff. He's a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jack?
Well, first off, I gotta say, I'm so impressed. Every time one of us brings up a story, Joe is throwing out the number.
He's a freaking computer. He is Mr. Fantastic.
My favorite story that it's not like an iconic Fantastic Four story, but I would definitely recommend it to anyone to read. Was one featuring the Puppet Master. And the Fantastic Four wake up in a regular town. They don't have powers. They're going.
Oh, Terror in a Tiny Town.
That's
236. Yes.
That was so good. And it had, without spoiling it had almost like a Twilight Zone ending where, the bad guy isn't necessarily doing things for the reason you would think a villain would do things. And it was such a good story.
Yeah, that was a good. Again, that was one of those Byrne issues. And something he did well was there's an FF annual. It's just one story in an annual. It's 17, I think. Joe can fact check me on that, but it's one where it's almost a horror story where a friend of theirs' car breaks down. The Scroll Milk, yes. And it is an absolutely. It is very much like if you drop the FF into a horror movie.
Yeah,
but it's so well done.
Yeah, there are parts of it that are. There's a part of it that is very much like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Tiny Town one you were referencing is my favorite FF story of all time.
So good.
But I don't know that it works for a newcomer because it plays so much on your knowledge. It's bittersweet because we know the characters so well.
Right, which is why I said I wouldn't call it an iconic.
Yeah, it's
just a good story.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So before we close down, I'd like each of our panelists to tell us where we can find information about them on social media. If they have a recent or an upcoming release that they would like to bring to everybody's attention, this is the time to do it. Bill, will you start?
Well, you can find me on Decades of Horror, the 70s and 80s, part of the podcast for gruesomemagazine.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm starting a webpage, BillMulliganAuthor.com, because come RavenCon, I believe, is when the book launch will be for my first book, Realm, published by Falstaff Books. And very exciting, very happy.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
I'm hoping that I can learn enough to be able to do this as I ride off into the sunset, and it's been a blast.
Okay. Wayland?
On Twitter, I'm at Wayland Smith 1. If you look for me on Facebook and you find an avatar that's a German Shepherd head, that's me. I write reviews for all comic book based TV shows and movies and some individual issues on a site called comicbookclog.com. I didn't name it, I just work there. My most recent release was the second novel in my Superhuman Mercenary series called Wildside, Old Gods and New Drugs. And for upcoming, right at the moment, I have 6 books in various stages of contract, but none of them are finalized, so I can't quite talk about them yet.
Joe?
Well, if you are on social media, I am on Facebook, both as J.A. Fludd and my artwork. You can find my artwork at the J.A. Fludd Portfolio, both on Facebook. And in the near future, I've just started working on this. I am doing a video history of the Fantastic Four for Facebook, for YouTube. It'll be called Forever Fantastic. That's number 4 Ever Fantastic. And I'm producing this for YouTube, and it's looking promising so far.
Looks great.
Thank you. And I'm hoping sometime this spring to have the first episode up.
Nice.
Clay?
You can find us at clayandsusangriffith.com, and we're on Facebook. I don't know if you can hear my cat yowling in the background, but I'm not killing him. He's just having problems. Clay Griffith and Susan Griffith, and Clay and Susan Griffith on Facebook. We don't have anything scheduled yet coming out, but we hope to have something this year. We're just not sure what, so we don't want to announce anything yet.
Bobby?
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. You can find me at bobbynash.com. I'm on Facebook at author Bobby Nash, Instagram Bobby Nash Writes, and Twitter just at Bobby Nash. Oddly enough, I had 3 things come out this week. It's a very feast or famine type of job we have. The first 2 books in a Western horror series I'm writing were released this week. Book 1 is called Dante's Tenth. Book 2 is called Dante's Showdown, and the publisher released them both the same week. And then subsequent books will come out once a year. And then just today, as we're recording this, the full cast audio short Snow Run, which is a 10-minute prequel to the first book in my Snow series, which you can see back there. So you can find out what happened before, book 1 started.
Okay, Jack?
First off, I got to give a thumbs up to Bobby's Snow series. Check it out. It's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm Jack Cullen. I write Recollections of a Maroon Night. It's an urban fantasy series about a town that's secretly full of magic users and magical creatures that hide out in between ages of magic and the police department that has to enforce them. And as of today, I can now say, because we had the big announcement, I'm going to be doing a 3-book deal for Vault Publishing. It's going to be a sci-fi alien abduction action comedy called Locke Ferguson versus the Aliens. The first book, Locke's Galactic Mess, will be out this September. I can be found at Jack Cullen Writes, and then on all the other social media stuff under Jack Cullen Books.
Congratulations.
Very cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
And congratulations, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, you can find me here at ConTinual, the convention that never sleeps. I'm on social media as Nancy Northcott. I spend probably more time on Twitter than anywhere else, which may not be a healthy habit, but I'm at Nancy Northcott on Twitter. Website, nancynorthcott.com. Just released the 4th book in my Light Mage Wars Paranormal Romances, and this spring, the 3rd and concluding volume of my historical fantasy trilogy, The Fourth King's Honor, will be out from Falstaff Books. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for joining in this discussion, and thank you to everyone who's watching. And finally, thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information, visit heroesonline.com.